Aeja again. We're back with another podcast.
Hey, I'm Kyron. Today we're going to be talking to you guys about Thanksgiving and kind of examining that a little bit deeper than maybe how we might experience it as a holiday in our own lives or even just as one day out of the year. We're going to be looking at what does Thanksgiving really mean? Where does it come from? What was the start of that tradition and what are the implications of the tradition? But I guess without further ado, I would ask you, Aeja, how do you, if you do celebrate with your family, how do you celebrate Thanksgiving? Typically, I know this year might be a little bit different due to COVID.
Yeah, I know. I'm curious about what Thanksgiving will look like this year. Normally, it's not like a super big holiday for my family, I guess. Normally, we'll just get together. Like sometimes my parents live separately, so I would go to my dad's side for sometimes and then go to my mom's side. I guess it was more of a thing on my dad's side with like there's more family members to arrive, so it seems like a bigger deal. But basically on both sides, it's just coming together and eating a bunch of food and just kind of hanging out. I don't think it's never been a super, I don't know. We're not super religious, so there's not like a lot of like prayer or anything involved. My family isn't like super patriotic, so there's not also a lot of like USA involved. But yeah, I mean it's a nice time. We get break from school. Like for the most part, Thanksgiving for me has just been like you have school off, you have this time to like go be with your family and eat a bunch of food, and that's like basically it. I don't know. What about you?
I would say likewise. I think that the way I celebrate Thanksgiving most of the time is similar. Like I go with my mom's side of the family, and all the extended family has dinner at one of our aunt's house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nice time to get to see your family, interact with everybody, see people maybe that you only see that one day a year, and kind of decompress. And of course, it was always a thing I looked forward to coming up as a kid, less because it was less even because of that dinner day, more because again, like you get the week off from school. There is like the Thanksgiving episodes on the Disney Channel. There is this sense of festivity surrounding it. But like similar to yours, I would say that my family wasn't necessarily, I guess we won't be really doing anything this year. I live separately from most of my family now. But it's just mostly a day to have dinner and see everybody. It was never for us, I don't think, yeah, a big religious thing or even a big like nationalistic thing. It was mostly just like Thanksgiving. What do you? I know my mother was always big on like, what are you thankful for in your life? In that kind of like avenue. And I think a lot of people have similar experiences to us when it comes to Thanksgiving, especially I think in the 2010s and 2020s as we move away from maybe the glorification of the United States as a whole, I think, but especially the inception of the United States, the lack of like glossing over that. I think that it begins to be like less and less politicized. But I think that's also interesting because, you know, we are both from California. So
Yeah.
those are our personal experiences. But I think that for other people, they might see that it's more and more politicized. Like, I guess the first place we both learned about Thanksgiving as a concept outside of like the celebration for your family or whatever would be like school. And I remember in school like watching shorts. And I think that this is I think that it's consistent throughout the framing of almost any moment in American history or any segment of American history that's not necessarily like beautiful or like glorious, which is a lot of it. The framing of it was interesting. I remember watching a movie where it was like all the pilgrims, they land and they meet the Native Americans and there's a hard winter and they get the fall and it comes out and they all have dinner together. And I'm just like, of course, when you go through fifth grade history, then you go through eighth grade history and they lay a little bit more on you. Then you go through 11th grade history and they give you the full story, I guess, so to speak, for American education. You learn more and more about how it was definitely not like that, how that was an isolated experience and a very much isolated point of view that is paraded. And I think that's consistent even when you look at, okay, how maybe we see videos about the civil rights movement. We'll watch the video where the white kids all take the black kid through the South, and it's a beautiful adventure. But I think that yeah, it does lose a lot of like the fact that when you came off the boat, you brought diseases with you as well, or the fact that when we all sat here and had dinner with this maybe group of Native Americans, we were also slaughtering and killing again off with disease and taking resources from other groups and other bunches of Native Americans who did not have that sitting down for dinner experience. And so I definitely think that it's an interesting way that Thanksgiving is framed in schools. And I think that it almost is brought up as like a lot when you're younger. And then I feel like when you get to high school, I didn't really hear a lot about like Thanksgiving. It wasn't something they retold the story of because you're at that point a lack of naivety enough to know that that's not what happened.
Yeah, I
Yep.
feel like I like my memories of Thanksgiving from being small or whatever was like those little like cartoons of like pilgrims and Native Americans that were like so much like characters and like making little pilgrim hats or like making some sort of like feathered headband, which is just like so out of like not okay. Like the way that Native Americans were like depicted was like these little like cartoon figures and like not as a real group of people that even still like exists in the US. It's like, oh, a very, very long time ago, there were these Native Americans that like had dinner with the pilgrims and like that's all you ever like we never I don't think going through even up through high school, I don't think I ever had some sort of like critical discussion about or even like education about Native Americans now, like in the US. And it was even talking about in history classes and stuff like that, it was like, oh yeah, like the French Indian War or whatever, so long ago, or like talking kind of as like we glossed over so much first of all like you said of the violence and like the horrible things that the US just did, but also it was only ever that was like the only thing we ever talked about. It was like, yep, the US did all of this stuff to them and like, settler colonialism, that was messed up, I guess. Like this all happened. Yeah, and we're never going to talk about them again or like what they're currently struggling with or that they even exist anymore. Like it was just it's really it's awful the way that we grow up learning about it and like I don't know. It's like it just kind of brings up the question I guess for me. It was like, what what is the point of having this whole like you learn a lot or not learn, you're told a lot of things about Thanksgiving when you're little and taught about the pilgrims and what happened and whatever. And it's in such like a disingenuous way. And it's like what I guess it brings up the question for me, like what is that serving why why is it still set up like this and like what is this doing to like kids as we're growing up, like why are we being taught like this? I don't know.
I mean, I think I always found it interesting that at least in the curriculum for where I was in at elementary school, we learned about Thanksgiving and the conception of America and all these things at like the same time, right? They all get condensed into this like one little gap. It doesn't acknowledge the fact that this is from 1492 to present day. It kind of looks at it as like this little sliver of, okay, large gap of time where there was no United States and we were all here like having a great time with the Native Americans and we were the pilgrims. And then there was this little time from the when we became a country to like early 1800s where we took them on the Trail of Tears and we did this and we did that. And that was terrible. And now present day, and it just kind of fogs off as if that's not still like a group that is definitely wronged continuously by our government. And you learn that at the same time as I think that you learn like all these other concepts that really don't have much to do with it, as you learn like of how the United States bought land from the French for the Louisiana Purchase or whatever. And it almost makes it seem as if uh, it's a legitimate thing, right? It's almost as if like they give you this crash course of all the horrific things that happened in U.S. history, because you leave elementary school aware that slavery was a thing. You leave elementary school aware that Native Americans were treated improperly by our government. You leave aware of all these things, but in a type of awareness that almost like, I would say, kind of obviates the need to question it. It's like, okay, well, you know that this was bad. Let's not look any further into it. And it's the same time that you're doing the Pledge of Allegiance and you're doing all these other things that really instill like a sense of nationalism in you, instill a sense of being an American, and instill a sense of identity for being an American into a child that young. And so, like when we look at like what is the purpose or why are these things framed that way, honestly, I would say like you learn about all these atrocious things that happen all through history in that little condensed time. And I think it's like to do it at a time where you really don't have the means or the know-how to criticize it with any actual critical thought. And then when you get back to it in high school, they do their best, I guess, to be critical of it, but in a way that addresses that, well, you've known about this since you were a kid, so we don't have to explain to you just how atrocious it was. But they do, because when you were explaining it as a child, you didn't know it. And it's interesting because just in the vein of like how these things come up, even when we look at them in media, like you said, we see Native Americans as cartoons. Like I think that if I told you to draw a Native American in fifth grade, you would know exactly what that meant in terms of the depiction of them. And I had watched a video a while ago, and I can't remember exactly who the quote is attributed to, but somebody talked about just how when you watch things in movies, even when you see the negative parts of it, even when you see maybe like in period pieces, the disease that we spread and the violence that we spread and the theft and the pillaging that was occurring, it depicts it in a way that seems fixable or it depicts it in a way that seems moved past. And it doesn't show you the most violence of it. It doesn't show you the most atrocious of it because that type of stuff can't even be shown on camera. And so it leads us to believe, well, that, okay, well, the worst of it is what they told us about, and it's 300 years later, we're in a new world. And I think that even we look at like the way we look at us as immigrants on Thanksgiving in the original Thanksgiving story and the way we treat immigrants today, I think that that definitely like has a show that no, it's not like even close to moved past. It's not even close to an old issue. These are all issues that we still have. And so, especially as we like pertain it into Thanksgiving, I think that even the fact that this is a holiday that we still like widely celebrate just shows like how ingrained that is into us because there are like some, I feel like, common cultural things that we just don't do anymore in America. Like the most of the country celebrates Indigenous Peoples Day as opposed to Columbus Day, but we still celebrate Thanksgiving. So it's really like this halfway denouncing of our negative history in a way that doesn't put any work on us at all, I think, or just on our government or in our institutions to recognize the wrongs that they've done in a meaningful way, in a way that alters the way that we move forward in the
Yeah.
future.
And like, well, like one, it's like not everybody celebrates Indigenous Peoples Day. Like, there's still a lot of like Columbus Day things, and it's like kind of crazy. But also, I think I agree with what you're saying. Like, even if we stopped recognizing Thanksgiving as a national holiday, or we started recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day, like those are important steps. But also, like our government is not, like you're saying, like taking action and fixing wrongs. Like there is this whole big idea that it's like the US has moved past that. Like the US has moved past like Native American issues, or has moved past like issues with like having a diversity of different ethnicities and races within the US. Like, oh yeah, like I don't know, segregation is over. Like that was so long ago. It's fine now. Or like the Native American issue, like we're not doing anything bad anymore. It's like this whole big idea that like the US was bad and had bad ideas, but that was a long time ago and like we fixed it. But like the actual like in reality it's like our government was still created on the basis of all of those things. Like that was the foundation of the United States. That was how it was created. And we're still working within this government and this framework. And it's really difficult to kind of escape that. And I think we see that. And when we're talking about something that is just like so large scale, it's kind of daunting. Especially like even just thinking about like education and like the like barriers that we would face when trying to fix how we teach about Thanksgiving even. And even though that's like it doesn't seem like it's going to be a giant thing, like it's still like there are so many just like ingrained layers into all of this that it's kind of shocking.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, I think that our general treatment, I mean, of Thanksgiving and of the concept of even that story again, like that narrative, it goes a lot to show that, well, one, there is a Maine in the United States. There's a Maine identity of what I think it means to be an American and what the idea of an American is, and then there's the other. And I think that the other contains everything that's really not, to be frank, like white and able-bodied and uh, anything that doesn't fit within the heteronormative society that we have today. The everything, you know, from being in a nuclear family to being of a certain wealth category to being of all those things, and it seeks to marginalize whatever is not. And so I think that when we look at just the way we view, okay, like again, going back to how we were immigrants in the Pilgrim story, and we came in as a country, so to speak, into someone else's land, and that was glorified. But that's not the messaging that's consistent with the way that we view immigrants today, or it's not consistent with the way that we view other people going into places today. To us, that we can see that as, I think that the United States sees a lot of things as negative or degenerative when it's not a
Done by
certain
the
identity doing it. And then when that identity does it, it becomes, for whatever reason, takes a different form, takes a different name, takes a different categorization. It's no longer illegal immigration. Now it is being a pilgrim into a new world. It stops being all these things that we, I think, have been, again, like educated to see as negative and educated to gloss over. And it's interesting to me because I think that the United States has an interesting way of, in order to maintain, I think, this illusion of purity and this illusion of like moral
superiority.
perfection, superiority over the rest of the world, they ignore a lot of things because that's, I think, what the government feels is required of us as a superpower. But I mean, I have like friends who are from Germany, and they'll tell you that you will not go through school in Germany without a full understanding of the atrocities that took place there in World War II. You don't get to. And you don't get to feel as though that those things are over, or you don't get to feel as though those things are glossed over. And not to say that that's perfect or there's not errors that I'm sure are there within their education system as well, due to how power structures work in education. But it does go to say that America has years of entire schooling where you just will not hear about slavery because US history is not on the category. You won't hear about the genocide of Native Americans because it's just not on the menu for that year. You just won't hear, like, those are things that you can go a 3-year stretch in elementary school, 2 years of your middle school, and 2 years of your high school experience without ever addressing,
Yeah.
at least in California's curriculum. And to me, that is kind of like wild.
Yeah, like, I mean, what is it, 4th grade where everyone in California has to do a mission project? Like, did you have to do one of those, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's like you can build a replica of a mission, but they're also not going to tell you about all of the like horrors
what
that
happened.
missionaries inflicted upon Native Americans and like the whole history of it. And it's like that to to emphasize certain parts of California's history and glorify like missions and have you go visit them, have you build them with your parents, all this stuff without addressing all of the other stuff is like it's not even just ignoring it. It's like specifically talking about something right and it's right there and we're still not going to address it. And I think that
Exactly. And I think that that's kind of horrific too. I think that that's like it's crazy because it is like, okay, imagine how many Native American students had to participate in that. To me, and it's the same, it's almost what America does with everything because I mean, we're from California, so we can't really imagine it, but I've talked to kids who are from the South who had to visit plantations. And I just think that that is like profoundly idiotic. And I think that it again it goes back to the question of whose identity is being served by that, whose identity is being protected by that, and whose identities are being either ignored or directly harmed, consciously harmed by doing that. And I think that yeah, it goes back to minorities in this country or marginalized groups in general are of a very particular, by design, they look a very particular way. And so when we look at like, I think how, yeah, they send us to missionaries and have us glorify that entire like period of history and that entire concept of a missionary without thinking like, and this is after this, like this is in 2010s. This is not like the 1970s. This isn't before the
when we
conflict.
were in fourth grade.
Exactly. And so I think that people can often feel like it's so removed or oh, but at least we're fixing it in 2020 because we're talking about it on Twitter. And I would probably wonder, like, what were the kids last year in fourth grade doing? And were they also doing missionary projects? And I would almost bet in some capacity,
Yeah,
probably.
because it's like, and it's like to say that we've moved past it. It's like we live in California, which like prides itself on being this like very progressive state or whatever, and it's like then like look a little bit closer. It's like mm, maybe we vote blue or whatever, but it's like there are so many different things that our government and that we are like made to participate in that are just kind of mind boggling. Yeah, and then one other part of Thanksgiving, which I think like stuff like the Macy's Day Parade or like
Mhm.
Black Friday have all been really incorporated into Thanksgiving sort of, and it's like now we're seeing like Gray Thursday or whatever where it's like very
Consumer.
much seeing consumerism and capitalism and whatever like blending into already this holiday which we have all of these other issues with, but then at the same time it's like now it's not even being set aside as that kind of holiday. It's still being focused on like buy more food. Like the amount of food waste that Thanksgiving probably produces is probably crazy. And then to have people also have to work on this holiday, like starting at midnight or whatever, for people to line up for Black Friday is also crazy. I don't know. There's so many different things coming in.
I think that's definitely like, I think that's with most holidays in the Western world, and honestly, at this point, the world in general, are so like consumer based, and they're always there's always a sale attached to them, or like Cyber Monday, or yeah, Black Friday, or all these things that is just like around a holiday based on being grateful for what you have.
Mhm.
And so it definitely again then it begs the question, well, is this holiday really about celebrating what you have, or is it nationalism laced in consumerism that many of us have co-opted for that purpose? And then I think that a lot of examination will bring you to the conclusion that it's the latter. And then it begins to beg the question, well, how do you celebrate these things and how do you enjoy these things? Because I think it is a big ask to ask anybody, even if you recognize these things, maybe when you're 18 and 19, to give up the traditions that you've been doing for all those years and to then just fully de-immerse yourself out of that. And so it is trying because it's like, how do you celebrate these things the way you've done them? Just keeping your traditions personally without glorifying uh, the history it's rooted in and supporting that. And I think that, I mean, when I look into it, I definitely would say, even looking at the Black Friday and Cyber Money, like that can only go if we participate in those things. Like you can only have these people show up to work if there's a line for those people. So I would like definitely encourage people, even if you are going to go shop on Black Friday, challenge yourself to not be the person who sits outside in a line and makes somebody's like life miserable that night. Or if you are going to enjoy Thanksgiving and watch your Macy's Day Parade and do the, I don't know what patriotic people do at Thanksgiving. I've never been to one, but do it with the intention of one, not erasing so much history and so many atrocities against a group of people that really like was minding their own business, but also just don't root it in nationalism. I think the way that we were talking earlier about how it can become a thing for family, or it can become a day to reflect on the things that you're grateful for, the things that you're thankful for. I think that that's like really uh, the best way that I think you can address Thanksgiving as something to celebrate and something to enjoy. Um, but I think that it has to be done while educating people and while being mindful of what else rests on this day and what other histories that to some degree are being addressed on Thanksgiving Day, even if your celebration is completely non-political, whatever. I do think that it is the responsibility of people who have the privilege of sitting down and having a nice meal with their families and all these other things to use that day to educate themselves on what exactly the Native American experience has been with this country and exactly what the history of that does really look like in a format that's not a rated G for fifth graders cartoon movie. And I think that if we can get to a point where most of us are doing that and the majority of people are doing that, then it would take some of that consumerism and it will take a lot of the nationalism away from the holiday. Because I don't think that there's anything to be proud of in the way that this country has handled its treatment of Native American people.
Yeah, I think for me, at least this year, and like as a closing up, like what I would advise or like some things to do, I guess, is like you said, like trying to educate yourself on different topics outside of like your state's curriculum, I think is important. And like like you said, not rated G, like little cartoons of what happened, like read indigenous accounts of things or watch movies that feature indigenous people and their own thoughts and stories, and like educating yourself. And then also it's like, I guess for me this Thanksgiving, it's like thinking about the privilege you have to do whatever you're doing on Thanksgiving. And also it's like this year, like give back directly, like you really can, you can give back directly. And it's like this year we're in a pandemic, indigenous communities are being disproportionately harmed by COVID. There are many relief funds or places you can donate, like literally you can physically donate money or resources and stuff like that to indigenous communities. And it's like it's a small thing you can do on a Thanksgiving, like, and if you're gonna buy something huge on Black Friday, maybe go a little smaller, donate some money to like people who need it and people who have been like historically harmed by our country.
I
That's what I'll
definitely
be doing on Thanksgiving. I would highly recommend people to think critically about what Thanksgiving is and donate away.
I would also encourage people, especially given the pandemic that we're in, to acknowledge which of these communities are being hit hardest by that, which a lot of the time it is Native American communities, and to do your part to reduce the spread by not having 50 people at your house for Thanksgiving this year, or not having a big football tailgate for the Thanksgiving game. I think that definitely can wait. And a big part of, yeah, educating yourself on the impact that this country has had on the Native American community isn't just addressing what was done to them in the past. It's addressing how are they still being mistreated today, and being conscious that you're not contributing to that, and being conscious to do what you can. Yeah, like you said, whether it's donating or whether it's being mindful of your actions in general, to minimize that in the future and forthcoming. But yeah, I think that wraps up today's episode. We'll be back with you guys in 2 weeks, so stay tuned.